Well, I've just got my hands on a new book that I'm reading through at the moment. It's called Freedom's Salesman. Now, the book features a collection of Senator David Leyonhjelm's articles and speeches over the years, and interesting to consider his outlook on political life given where he has come from. Senator Leyonhjelm was a member of Young Labor during the It's Time years. He later joined the Liberal Party, where he remained until they pushed for gun control in the wake of the Port Arthur massacre. Since 2013, he's served as a senator for the Liberal Democrats and seen the game pretty much from every angle. Now, you might not agree with everything he has or says, but when he has, I'll tell you what, he's got guts to pin the colours to the mast and defend his views, and that's something you've got to admire, isn't it? So we thought it'd be time to have a chat with him on the line right now. Senator David Leyonhjelm, thanks for your time.
Good morning.
Well, the book first up, what made you decide to put all of those anecdotes and speeches, etc., into a book?
Well, I'm a man on a mission. I'm trying to convince Australians to all become libertarians and leave everyone else alone. That's my aim in life these days in politics. I'd like Australians to believe that they get on and they can make better lives for themselves and their families and for other people as well if the government does less, if it doesn't put its hand in their pockets as much, and if it doesn't tell them how to live their lives socially, private lives. So I've been writing articles over the last three and a half years, printing them in newspapers. I've been giving speeches in the Senate quite regularly on issues surrounding that, based on those principles. And I thought, well, look, their audience is somewhat limited, and perhaps the book might help to get the message out there a bit further. So that was what's behind it. It's a collection of stuff that I've said, either in Parliament or I've written mostly for newspapers, that I think sort of sets out the views of, well, we call ourselves libertarians and the Liberal Democrats, and what I'm trying to do is convince people your life is better without the government looking over your shoulder.
And I guess two examples that we've chatted with on this very show over the last couple of months where you've sort of put that would fit into that category would be the excise on tobacco, and also when people put forward an idea of a sugar tax. Yes,
that's right. They're both good examples of nanny states, actually. And that nanny state has been a major focus of mine in being in the Senate, lots of other things as well. But the nanny state, the definition of it is that the government tries to make you do something or taxes you for your own good, irrespective of whether you think it's for your own good or not. So imposing a tax on tobacco because they think, well, you should be smart enough to give up smoking by yourself, and if you don't, then we're just going to make you pay for it, and the same goes with sugar. There's lots of other things, of course, where the government intrudes, which aren't nanny state things. They take away our fundamental freedoms. Sometimes they relate to terrorism. Sometimes they relate to how our money is spent, so they tax us too much and then they misuse the money. But they all relate to the intrusion of government into our lives.
So, I mean, to get to where you are from a political perspective, and I know you've been there for a while, but I mentioned very briefly in the introduction there of being a member of Young Labor, then a member of the Liberal Party. Were you always of that libertarian view and just trying to find a vehicle for it, or have your politics changed over your life?
I think in social terms I always was libertarian. The issues that motivated me a lot when I was 19, 20, 21 were conscription and the fact that I didn't think it was legitimate to force people to serve in the military, and abortion, which was an issue in those days. People were being locked up and doctors charged and so forth. So those two issues sort of convinced me that the government really could overreach and often did overreach. It took me quite a lot longer before I realised that it also did in the economic sphere. And there is a saying that if you're not a socialist at 20, you've got no heart. But if you're still a socialist at 40, you've got no brains. And if that's true, then I must have a heart and brains, because I was a socialist at 20. Well, I thought I was. And I was certainly no longer a socialist by the time I was 40. I was, by that stage, of course, working and earning money and paying tax, and came to the reasonably sensible conclusion, I think, that I was better at spending my money than the government was at spending it.
I mean, when you say that phrase, that that line, I guess, about being a socialist at 20, having a heart, and as I say, if you're still a socialist at 40, not having a brain, so to speak. Look, there would be so many people who were the socialists, I suppose, at that age, particularly around university campuses, and yet they've gone on to professional lives and been very different.
Yes, that's right. It's not an uncommon journey. Not everybody does it.
Yeah.
And I'm actually delighted with the fact that the bulk of our supporters in the Liberal Democrats these days are youngsters who are bypassing the socialism phase, if you like, and rejecting the sort of stultifying nanny state control, you will do it our way or else type of attitude that they are exposed to. In many cases, they've come through schools and universities with absolutely rampant political correctness forced down their throats, where they really weren't at liberty to think for themselves, and they're rejecting it, and they're flocking to our party in quite considerable numbers. Now, I'm not suggesting that's a majority. I still think the typical path is for someone to be left wing when they're a youngster, because it's an idealistic outlook on life, and then to get over that in later life. And some never get over it, of course. They remain lefties all their lives. But most people do realise eventually, look, the old Kerry Packer argument, I don't think you're spending my money so well that I should give you any more of it.
Well, I guess, though, one thing before we move on a little bit on this regard, you've always been politically active, though.
Yes, I have always been politically active. I'm not sure I can explain that entirely, although more recently I guess I've said that I think it's the difference between, you've got a choice between getting involved and throwing rocks at your TV. And because, things will get under your skin, I guess a lot of sensible people just turn their TV off and tune out. Mm-hmm. I found it hard to do that. I think there are many things that we could do to make Australia a better place. And when they're not happening, that's extraordinarily frustrating.
Well, we've talked about you leaving, I guess, the Labor Party. Then you were a member of the Liberal Party, or the Young Labor movement, I should say. You were a member of the Liberal Party, and that came to an end because of gun control, didn't it?
Well, that was the final straw, yes. Although I think I was leaving the Liberal Party before then, because I'd already joined the Shooters Party at that point. But yes, the Liberal Party I had hopes for. As my economic views developed, I became more in tune with the idea of low taxes, doing more for yourself, spending your own money, and not throwing government money or our taxes, if you like, at problems and hoping that would fix them. Mm. And although the Liberal Party has historically been less inclined to do that than the Labor Party, it was still pretty much doing it. And often I thought, well, the only difference between the Liberal and the Labor Party is they're arguing about whether which one is better at spending our money. And the question of whether to spend our money in the first place never seemed to come up. And therefore, the question of whether to take it from us in the first place also never came up. So I was disillusioned with the Liberal Party, but I really couldn't see any alternatives at that point. Minor parties in those days were pretty uncommon. Mm. And but then when the gun laws came out in 1996, after the Port Arthur massacre, I'm a sporting shooter. I know lots and lots of sporting shooters. None of us have never harmed a flea, and yet there we were being treated like criminals in waiting, and it was just too much. I couldn't stick around anymore.
Well, talking about people being fluid on politics, I know that Mark Latham has helped you with the launch of the book.
Mm. Yes, Mark has had an interesting journey. He, of course, was the leader of the Labor Party. Had he won the, 2004 election, I think it was?
Yeah, I think it was.
He would have been the Prime Minister. Mm. So, yes, he's been pretty close to the centre of action. And the Labor Party is far from the Libertarian Party of the Liberal Democrats, either on economic or social issues. They're relatively liberal on a few social issues, but not that many. Mm. And so Mark himself has come quite a long way. It's not the first time that a Labor person has come in the direction of libertarian values and is recognisably libertarian, like the Liberal Democrats are. Michael Costa, the former New South Wales Treasurer,
yes, indeed,
pretty much made that same journey.
Just before I let you go, you've got. I mean, the main reason is talking about your new book that's out, but we've had, of course, it looks like the government's abandoning this idea of the clean energy target. They're edging away from that. I guess that would be something you welcome?
Yes, it is. The electricity market is incredibly distorted, and because of the renewable energy target and because the subsidies are paid to renewable energy generators, which are then passed on to consumers, and making it easier for renewable energy generators to compete and the traditional generators and harder for the traditional generators to enter the market. So I don't like interfering with markets. I believe in free markets. I've got nothing in particular against renewable energy, except for the fact that it's technically difficult because there's no backup when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. There's no generation, and the fact that it's subsidised. That's probably the most important thing, that's subsidised.
Yeah, it needs to stand on its own 2 feet.
On 2 feet, yeah.
I've got to leave it for there this morning. Thanks for your time as always.
My pleasure. Thank you.